Chapter 8, Chapter 7, The City of Wind. Chapter 7, The City of Wind.
You can climb down now, Mina,
Kat called in the direction of the nearest tree as Ryu stepped back from the slaughtered Biruburu.
They're dead. I noticed,
Mina replied with only a little hesitation as she descended from the branches. It seemed that her previous escorts through the countryside had tended to deal with monsters out of her sight, but Ryu, Kat, and Nina didn't really have that option available to them. She had adjusted surprisingly quickly, however, as had Nina, who had learned how to back up the two more physical fighters with her magic. Landing on her feet before the bodies, she glanced down at them curiously.
Why are these ones orange instead of purple? They're the males,
Kat explained.
Male and female Biruburu don't get along, so they actually have completely separate ranges. The females stay in the Tentar area, and the males are found around Windia. They all migrate towards the border when it's mating season, and stay out of each other's way the rest of the year. So if we're seeing them, that means we're near home,
Mina deduced.
I didn't know monsters were that complicated, I suppose is the best word. They're like any other animal.
Kat shrugged.
They've got patterns to their behavior. Learning them helps you know what to expect.
She paused, cocking an ear.
Sounds like there's some beaks nearby, and not the gong head variety, either. Snip head. That could be bad. Come on, let's go see if we can spot them from the top of that tall ridge over there. We'll want to see those coming, if they come after us.
All right, Mina agreed, following her as she scampered forward ahead of Ryu and Nina, who watched them go with slight amusement.
She never stops, does she?
The elder sister asked Riley, wings beating. She seemed to prefer flying rather than walking whenever possible, generally hovering about a foot off the ground. She had found an alternative to the bulky magic school uniform in a town one day, a blue dress with white and gold trim. About the only problem with it was that the skirt didn't go all the way around, leaving her right leg almost completely bare, to her own slight embarrassment. It was still better than the heavy orange robes in the summer heat, though, and she had added black boots and gauntlets over her forearms, both trimmed with gold as well. The effect was striking, and Ryu had had a hard time not staring.
Who, Kat?
Ryu shook his head.
Not as far as I can tell. I'm starting to think the reason she can't use magic is because it's going directly into her bloodstream. It would explain a lot,
Nina admitted, smiling slightly as she watched Mina use her wings to levitate above the ground as she ascended the hill.
She's Mina's new hero, you know. She's in absolute awe of her. I don't think she's ever known anybody quite like her before. And I don't just mean the fact that she can pull a Birubara's skull out with her bare hands. I don't think Kat minds.
Ryu shrugged.
She makes friends pretty easily for somebody who's had the kind of life she has. I suppose.
Nina's smile vanished.
Sometimes I wish I had that skill. There are worse things to have,
Ryu replied neutrally.
Hey, guys.
Kat called down, interrupting the conversation.
We can see the Great Bridge from here. We're almost there. About time.
Ryu yelled back, then turned to Nina.
We should probably get up there and join them.
Probably, she agreed. Climbing up the hill, they found Kat and Mina waiting for them, gazing off to the east. Just within view, they saw the edge of the land breaking off into an abyss stretching both north and south, the only way across a thin stone pathway stretching out into the void, or so it seemed from this far away. They had been on the road for weeks now, with this destination in mind, and now, it seemed, they were almost there. The Wing clan was one of the oldest known to history, and for as long as history remembered, they had occupied the same territory, the northern country of Windia. The royal family, despite numerous trials and tribulations, still maintained control of the throne down the eons, through the bloodline of female heroes of both dragon wars. Before their disappearance from the world, the Light Dragons had always counted on the Wing clan as one of their closest allies whenever strife had threatened the world. The Windian Chasm was an unfortunate geographical flaw in the country that had apparently always been a part of it. Stretching down out of the north, the divide nearly cut through the entire continent, and according to some history books, actually had in the past. At present, the only way around it was several days' travel back to the south, which they had passed up. The exact shape of the gap changed every few centuries, whenever a geological disturbance in the area altered it. Windians throughout the ages had bemoaned the choice of their ancestors in placing their capital city on the west side of the chasm for exactly that reason, but there was no helping it. The only alternative to the southern route was also the Wing clan's most impressive national landmark. As long as the chasm had existed, so too had the Windian Great Bridge, the longest in the world. A massive span of stonework in its current incarnation, it had also been constructed of wood in previous forms, its nature changing with each rebuilding. Historians claimed at one time, it had even been made of metal, as ridiculous as that sounded. Whatever its form, the Great Bridge was one of the world's permanent fixtures.
Good thing we've got you along, Your Highness,
Kat said as they all looked out at it.
The Great Bridge doesn't let just anybody in on the other side. We'd have had to go the long way around if it wasn't for you. That's because it leads into the catacombs underneath the palace,
Mina explained.
Only people who would be allowed into the palace for other reasons anyway are allowed to take that route, of course.
She smiled.
It would be pretty silly if the two of us weren't on that list, though, right? We'll see,
Nina replied noncommittally, the same way she had to all of her sister's predictions that she'd be greeted warmly. Ryu tended to agree with the elder sibling. He didn't know the story, but he could make a few guesses, and those led him to believe that the situation wasn't one that would change just because she was coming home unexpectedly.
I doubt we'll be making it there tonight. Not gonna happen,
Ryu said firmly, glancing up at the sky.
Sun's already starting to come down. I don't think we want to try crossing that sucker at night. Yeah, no.
Kat glanced around, eyes settling on a likely-looking glade.
Set up camp down there tonight. Sounds good,
Ryu agreed, and they all headed down.
You're getting dinner, by the way, since there doesn't seem to be any water around here, running or otherwise. Fine, use logic.
She pretended to snap angrily.
Be that way. If you insist. Come on, you two,
Nina told them mildly.
If you're going to fight, do it after we've all had something to eat. We were just kidding,
Ryu replied.
Mostly. I know you two.
Nina raised an eyebrow.
And mostly could turn into an impromptu arm wrestling match at any moment. Guilty as charged,
Kat admitted.
Alright, I'll go find something edible. I'll try not to make it bird this time. You know, it's not really like cannibalism,
Nina pointed out.
We were joking about that. Yeah, but I don't like the same thing 2 nights in a row anyways.
Kat shrugged.
Even if it was good.
Sniffing the air off to the east, she grinned.
And speaking of good, I do believe I smell an actual wild boar instead of the kind that's colored like carrots. Pretty rare in male Biruburu turf. We should take advantage of that. Have fun,
Ryu called as she dashed off.
Alright, girls, let's get our campfire set up before she gets back, shall we? Of course,
Nina said, and Mina nodded as well. After their time on the road together, they had settled into a routine in the evenings. Either Ryu or Kat would procure dinner while the other helped Mina and Nina make the campfire. For several reasons, they had avoided even small villages while in Corsair. Nina was about the only one of them who would have been wise to go into one. Once in Windia, they had stopped by one to pick up a few supplies, but hadn't bothered staying at the inn. In a strange way, Mina actually seemed to be enjoying roughing it, and they'd all silently agreed not to interfere with that. Neither of the Windian girls was any better of a cook than Ryu or Kat, but between the 4 of them, they were able to keep from actually ruining any of the meals. Once dinner was done, they spent an hour or 2 up talking around the campfire before turning in. On their first night, Nina had insisted on taking her turn on watch, something Ryu and Kat had only objected to lightly. It meant they would have more time to sleep, after all, and they both knew she was more than capable of it. Tonight, however, Ryu eventually noticed that she wasn't sleeping during his turn. Mina and Kat both were, the latter snoring audibly, but Nina's eyes were open, staring up at the stars. He pretended not to notice, keeping an eye out for monsters instead. It wasn't really any of his business if she could sleep or not. When she joined him silently, however, he turned his head to give her a brief, understanding smile.
Having trouble dropping off? It happens on occasion,
Nina said quietly.
There's no helping it when it does. I'll try again in a little while. That works sometimes,
Ryu agreed. They both remained silent for some time, then, staring up at the stars, before he spoke again.
So, what are you going to do when we get to Windia? Don't tell me you don't know, okay? We both know you do. Well, when you put it that way.
She said, slightly sharply, then relaxed a little.
Explain the situation to our parents, then leave. The less time I spend in the city in general, the better for all of us involved, but getting out of the palace as quickly as possible will be the most important thing. If I'm recognized there. Well, let's just say I can't let that happen. I think I know what you're saying.
Ryu nodded.
So you'll get a room in an inn for the night. Correct.
Nina gave him a look.
I was considering asking you to escort me back to hometown, but if you'll be staying here, looking for that thief of yours. We didn't find any trace of her in that village,
Ryu pointed out.
Could be this was a false lead too. We'll ask around once we get up there, but if we don't find anything within a couple days, we might just be heading back to hometown after all. I suppose I can wait that long,
Nina decided.
I might as well help you two look while we're there, too. It's the least I can do to repay you for all of this. Well, we won't say no.
Ryu smiled again, as did she, but both were strained this time.
Hell of a couple of weeks, hey. I haven't had it nearly as bad as the rest of you,
Nina reminded him.
I only had to deal with one demon. And your friend Pao is even worse off. Kinda twisted that the guy who stayed out of all this demon business so far is in more trouble than the rest of us, isn't it?
Ryu commented.
I'm glad Mina settled down about that. I mean, it's not that I don't appreciate her offering to give him the royal family's protection in Windia, but... Yes.
Nina smiled slightly.
It's better that she understands the situation now. I'll have to thank Kat for befriending her, she needed somebody new to talk to, after this ordeal.
She glanced over at the sleeping Warren.
I know she intends on accompanying you until you catch the thief, but has she told you what she plans on doing after that? Not to insult her, but... She doesn't seem the type to put much thought into long-range planning. That's not really her thing, is it?
Ryu had to admit.
I already asked her if she wanted to stick around with us after that, actually, and she said sure. I'll probably ask Rand the same thing next time I see him. We were always going to go independent eventually anyways, and that means we'd need a lot more people. As far as I'm concerned, we can't really do better than those two. If Mr. Marks is as good of a person as Kat is, I'd have to agree.
Nina nodded, then paused for a moment before continuing.
Are you and her in a relationship, then? Not right now, no,
Ryu replied after a few silent moments himself.
We might eventually, but not yet. Really?
Nina asked, then blushed.
I'm sorry, that was rude. It's just that the way you two act. It seems like it would be only natural. Oh, I think it's safe to say we're both feeling it,
Ryu admitted.
I've never really met a girl who seems to see so much of life the same way as I do before, and I think she feels the same. We've got far too much in common for both of our own good, we're already close friends in a short period of time, and barring dying young, it looks like we're going to be working together for a long time. So why not?
Nina asked, sounding more curious than anything else.
That all makes sense to me. What's stopping you, or her, from taking it to the next level? When I said that we had a lot in common, I didn't just mean the good things.
Ryu glanced at Kat.
She's all smiles and sunshine on the surface, but she's had a pretty hard life up until fairly recently. I had Bao to back me up, but there were some bad times involved there as well. When stuff like that happens, it gets to you, deep down inside. It makes it harder to completely trust somebody, anybody, even if you want to. That's the part of us that keeps things from moving as quickly as they would for a normal couple of guys our age, I guess.
He chuckled self-consciously.
I don't know if that makes much sense, but... No, it does,
Nina said, eyes thoughtful.
That actually makes a great deal of sense. It might not to normal people, like you said, but I'm not exactly normal either. Normalcy is overrated.
Ryu shrugged.
Especially in this line of work.
He chuckled.
Not that you're too likely to get into it. Am I?
Nina replied, something in her voice he didn't recognize.
It seems completely ridiculous to you. Well.
Ryu thought it over.
Not really, on face value. Black mages are a highly valuable commodity in this line of work, and you are good. That much is obvious. Every group like the kind we're trying to start up needs a couple of good black mages. I guess what I meant was, if I'm reading you correctly, this doesn't seem like the kind of work you would be interested in getting into. You would probably do just fine in it if you wanted to, but that'd require you wanting the job in the first place, which doesn't seem quite so likely to me. I suppose I can't argue that.
Nina kept her eyes on him, barely any of her true feelings showing in them as usual.
Highly valuable, From what you've told me, that's one role your group hasn't quite managed to fill yet. So what would you say if, just hypothetically speaking, I was to ask if you were still hiring? Hypothetically speaking.
Ryu looked back, mentally ordering himself not to blush or fidget or do anything else humiliating.
I'd say welcome aboard, and good to have you. Shame this is only a hypothetical, really. Perhaps it is,
Nina replied mysteriously.
Well, I'm going to go try and get some sleep again. Hopefully I'll be able to before Cat wakes me up for my turn on the watch.
Wings lifting her off the ground, she drifted away, back towards the campfire.
Have a nice night, Ryu. You too, Nina,
Ryu said quietly, checking the dragon's tear once he was sure she wouldn't see him doing so. It was a solid, dark green now, about what he would have expected after their time on the road, and nothing more. Looking up from it, he glanced at Nina again, then back over to Cat, before turning away from the fire and back to wariness. He did a lot of thinking that night, without accomplishing much by doing so, before waking Cat up for her turn and going to sleep. More. We still need more power. God needs more power. Give yourselves to our God. Pray to God. Praise God. Sacrifice your bodies and souls to God. You are destined to become God's power. The next day, they woke up early and immediately set off towards the west, reaching the Windian Great Bridge within a few hours. Even then, it still took the better part of another before they started to approach the looming city of Winland on the far side of the gap. Nina and Mina took the trip across the bridge in stride, but Ryu felt a little edgy about the mile-long fall into the ocean so close on either side of him, and he was pretty sure Cat was thinking the same thing.
Remember, we agreed to tell people about the kidnapping and the gang, but not about the demon part,
Ryu reminded them all as they approached their destination.
They probably wouldn't even believe us, and it would make them suspicious of what we are going to tell them. Let's just keep it simple and believable.
There was also the fact that Mina, at least, didn't seem to be caught up in whatever the demons were doing, and the rest of them had all agreed to keep her out of it, but actually telling her that probably wouldn't go over well.
We know,
Nina said.
Don't worry, we all know how to keep our mouths shut. Here we go.
They were near enough to the gated cave in the side of the opposite cliff that the great bridge led to that they could clearly see the guards on duty, and the two men were standing at attention, spears held at the ready. They were both wearing light chainmail along with the open-faced, dome-shaped helmets that had been the standard of the Windian Guard for ages, and were glaring at the approaching travelers with suspicion, if not outright hostility.
This way is closed to commercial travel,
one of the guards told them as they drew near.
You'll have to take the long way around, to the south. No exceptions. Fortunately, soldier, I'm not exactly what one would call commercial travel, and neither are my companions,
Mina replied coolly, stepping to the front.
Your Highness.
The soldier gasped, and they both fell to their knees.
Forgive me. We had heard you were kidnapped. Are these Rangers from hometown, in Oria,
Mina explained.
They had business of their own with my captors, and rescued me in the process, then offered to escort me home. It's been a long trip, and I'd like to finish it, if you don't mind. But Your Highness.
The other guard protested, staring at Nina as if she were a Biruburu in a dress.
This is... Is there a problem with one of my friends?
Mina asked coldly.
Of course not, Your Highness.
The first guard sputtered, carefully looking anywhere but at Nina.
It's just that. It's fine, Your Highness,
Nina told her quietly.
Gentlemen, let me assure you that I have no intention of remaining within Winland. As soon as we've finished escorting Her Highness home, I'll go back to Oria where I belong. That's quite enough of that,
Mina replied sharply.
We will discuss that later, in private. For now, I would appreciate being allowed to enter my own home. Of course, Your Highness.
The guard jumped back to his feet and banged on the gate.
Open it up. Princess Mina has returned home.
As the startled guards on the other side began to open the gate, he turned back to them.
We'll be happy to provide you with an escort through the labyrinth, Your Highness. If they'd prefer, your escorts can. They've brought me all the way here from Tantar in safety,
Mina reminded him.
They should be more than capable of conveying me through the labyrinth to the palace as well. I do remember the way, soldier. I wasn't implying.
The soldier struggled with it, then gave in.
Of course, Your Highness. As you command. I'm glad to hear it,
Mina said dryly as the gate opened, the other guards all giving Nina the same look as the first two had.
Shall we proceed, ladies and gentlemen? Whatever you say, Your Highness,
Ryu replied, somehow managing to keep a straight face, as they walked past the guards and into the caverns. The natural rock quickly gave way to a brick tunnel as they passed out of sight of the guards and began turning corners. Once they were out of earshot as well, he gave Mina a glance.
This is a new side to you, I have to say. They just make me so angry,
Mina whispered, sounding more depressed than irritated now that they were away from the guards.
That stupid superstition.
Shaking her head, she floated forward, leading the way.
We've been over this before, Mina,
Nina reminded her.
That belief is firmly rooted in the people's minds, and there's nothing you, or me, or anybody can do to change their minds about that. That's why father and mother.
She paused, looking at Ryu and Kat.
Hey, if you don't want to talk about it, that's fine with us,
Kat assured her.
It's personal, right? Private. We get that. We've all got stuff in our pasts we don't want to talk about. Yeah,
Ryu agreed.
We know how it goes. Thank you, but... It's all right,
Nina said slowly.
You both deserve to know, after how much you've helped us.
She took a deep breath before continuing.
The royal family of Windia is directly descended from the lineage of both the heroes of the Light Dragons and the Wing Clan. My namesake, and yours, Ryu. In the aftermath of the Second Dragon War, the two heroes chose to defy long-standing custom and law in order to marry, something that never would have been allowed had they not literally saved the world from destruction only months prior. It's public record, in the history books.
Ryu nodded.
The only time clans have ever been allowed to interbreed. My ancestors were no hypocrites,
Nina continued.
Rather than consider themselves an exception to the rules, they formed a treaty between the Dragon Clan and Wing Clan allowing intermarriage. As nice as that sounded from an idealistic standpoint, it turned out to be an unmitigated disaster. The laws preventing interbreeding to protect the breath were all fully justified. Within only a few generations, the breath of fire had been weakened to a shadow of its former self, and the breath of wind was completely gone. I've always thought that was a little weird,
Kat said, frowning.
I'm no scientist or anything, but it's not like every Wing clansman rushed right out to marry a Dragon clansman, is it? There should have been plenty of them who kept on marrying their own kind and humans. And why was it completely wiped out if the breath of fire was only weakened? We can't really prove that part, since the Dragon clan's extinct or whatever,
Ryu reminded her.
Kind of have to take history at its word for that. You've got a point about the first thing, though. Perhaps I could have phrased that better,
Nina said thoughtfully.
It might have been more accurate to say the benefits of the breath of wind vanished. Our national blessing became a curse instead. It became highly volatile in those who continued to hold its power. Chaotic. Unpredictable. Somebody who still held the breath of wind could wake up one day and find that the ability had vanished completely, only to be restored years later at complete random. Or, far worse, they could transform into the form of the great bird only to find themselves unable to turn back, and be trapped in that shape for the rest of their life. Holy shit!
Kat shook her head.
Yeah, if that was me, I'd just say to hell with it and stop trying. Not worth the risk. When you think about it, it does sort of make more sense that way,
Ryu added.
The breath isn't completely magical, after all. It's genetic, too. I'm no scientist either, but I'm pretty sure stuff doesn't just vanish like that after one generation. Things probably just started going wrong like you said, and the magical part of the equation made them go wrong for everybody in the Wing Clan, not just the ones who bred with Dragon clansmen. That's more or less what we believe happened as well,
Nina agreed, glancing at Mina, who continued to stay several feet ahead of them, clearly wanting no part in the conversation. Sighing, she turned back to them.
At any rate, the Dragon clan's disappearance hit Windia particularly hard. We weren't interbreeding anymore, not very often, anyways, but they were still our closest allies. We were one of the first countries to abandon the worship of the Dragon God, but we didn't turn to Saint Evil like the rest of the world. Most Wing clansmen today are atheistic. Really?
Ryu blinked, then shrugged.
Well, hey. Not like either of us is a religious nut, or anything. Not sure how Ray would feel about it, though,
Kat added.
Maybe we shouldn't tell him if we run into him again. That paladin you told me about.
Nina shook her head.
I'm afraid it's common knowledge among the clergy of Saint Eva. They've been trying to persuade my father into allowing them into the country ever since he ascended the throne. That's not what this is about, though. Despite our religious beliefs, or lack of them, Wing clansmen are actually highly superstitious. We're far more likely to believe shady folklore than word of God, thanks to the strange things that have happened to our people in the recent past. And one of those superstitions is why you live in hometown instead of here.
Kat guessed as they rounded another corner of the labyrinth.
Yes.
Nina's voice turned bitter.
A quaint belief that our clan was cursed for breaking the natural order of things and interbreeding with the Dragon clan, as was theirs. Ever since they disappeared, certain less than rational Windians have been waiting for the day we would suffer the same fate, and be destroyed completely. Nobody knows who came up with the idea in the first place, but apparently, the sign that disaster will befall the Wing clan is that a girl with black wings will be born from the line of the heroes.
Wait.
Ryu stared at her.
They think you're a friggin' sign of the end of the world because you have black wings. Either of the world, or just of the Wing clan.
Nina sighed.
The sort of people who believe those kinds of things don't really care much about the difference between the two. It's all the same to them. That has got to be the stupidest thing I have ever heard of.
Cat made a face.
And I've heard some pretty damn stupid things. So does that mean those guards back there knew who you were? They sure were giving you the stink eye. I tend to doubt it.
Nina shook her head.
I certainly don't remember any of them. No, they're probably not actual believers, but the superstitions spread to a lesser degree even through people who generally know better, and black wings are associated with bad luck in general. Any Windian unlucky enough to have feathers of that color is encouraged to live elsewhere in the world. Fortunately, it's also the rarest color. Still stupid.
Cat grumbled as they rounded one last corner of the labyrinth and found another gate, barricading a set of stairs leading upward. The soldiers there were clearly waiting for them, standing at attention.
The men at the entrance sent word ahead, Your Highness,
one of them told Mina, opening the gate.
Your mother awaits you above, in the palace. Thank you, soldier,
Mina told him, glancing back at the other three.
Come on, everybody. We're finally back home.
Smiling again, she flew up the stairs, and Nina followed with a resigned look in her eyes, Ryu and Cat behind her.
Wait,
the soldier protested, looking at Nina with the same hostility as the rest of the men.
Your Highness. She doesn't want to hear it, Bob,
Ryu advised him shortly without stopping to glance back.
Take my word for it.
The stairs were long, but straight, with one more gate at the top, this one already open. Walking out through it brought the four of them into what looked like a pleasant indoor garden, with well-cultivated shrubbery and even an artificial stream. The surroundings were, unfortunately, spoiled by several dozen guardsmen waiting for them around the open gate, looking remarkably unfriendly but saying nothing.
Shit,
Ryu growled.
Should have known sending word ahead would go like this from those guys. Pity we didn't explain things a little better. You mean our kind of explanation?
Cat muttered back.
Is there any other kind? Not really.
She frowned.
Think it's going to come to that here? Can't say I much like the odds at the moment. That will not be necessary,
Mina said firmly.
Mother? Are you here? Mina.
An older woman in an expensive-looking white dress called back as the soldiers opened a path for her. Her wings were a deep pink, and her hair was the same blonde as Nina's, decorated by a heavy-looking golden crown. She had a quiet, dignified air about her, but the same odd, solitary pain in her eyes as her older daughter.
You're safe. What happened to you? Who are these people? Mother.
Mina ran through the soldiers into her arms.
This is Ryu, one of those rangers I told you about. He and Cat came to help Nina rescue me. Nina.
The queen regarded her elder daughter without a hint of recognition.
And who is Nina, dear? Mother.
Mina asked after a long moment, confused.
You know who Nina is. She's my sister. Hey.
One of the guards grunted, and the others all started to mutter.
Your Highness, what is this all about? Mina, please,
the queen said, a strained look beginning to show on her face.
I understand that you've been through quite an ordeal, but you're far too old for this silliness. You know as well as I do that you have no sister. Your Majesty, if I may.
Nina spoke up somberly.
It seemed the leader of the criminals was under the misapprehension that we were related. We're still not quite sure why. He was incorrect, of course, but... Well, as you've said, it's been quite an eventful period, and Her Highness hasn't fully recovered. That seems to be the case.
The queen looked back at her, her face completely blank.
Thank you, young lady. And you, Mr. Battison, wasn't it? Just doing my job, Your Majesty,
Ryu explained carefully.
We had been contracted on some unrelated business with the Jokers anyways, so we took the liberty of freeing Her Highness while we were there, and she asked us to escort her home. Our next job was in the city, so we were more than happy to oblige. The royal family of Windia is grateful to you, then.
The queen turned away quickly, arms still around Mina, who was watching the proceedings in silent, growing despair.
We won't keep you, then. Captain, give them a few hundred zenny for their services and accompany them to the door.
She paused at one of the doors out of the garden, still looking away.
And give the poor girl something to cover her wings. If something were to happen to her in the city because of that ridiculous superstition, it would reflect poorly on the royal family, and we would have to take decisive action. I'm sure you understand. Of course, Your Majesty.
The apparent leader of the guards saluted, then turned to one of the others as she ushered Mina out of the garden.
You, get a cloak, immediately. And you, go see the treasurer about that zenny.
As the guards scrambled off, he turned to Ryu.
Right this way, Mr. Battison. We'll wait for them at the entrance. Of course,
Ryu agreed, just as neutrally, and the three of them followed the captain through the castle, not really bothering to look at their surroundings much. All three of them were focused on keeping themselves controlled. The two guards were waiting for them at the door, one with the cloak, the other with a pouch of zenny.
Be careful out there,
the captain told them, looking away.
We're all very grateful for the service you've done to the royal family today. We'd appreciate it if there wasn't any further trouble in the near future. We don't plan on causing any,
Ryu told him firmly as Nina draped the cloak over her back. There was no further exchange of words. The doors to the castle opened, allowing them out, and then closed firmly shut behind them. None of the three of them spoke as they crossed the bridge over the moat, nor did they look back, even once. Only when they were a fair distance away did Cat deliberately walk into a shady alley. A few moments later, the telltale sounds of gratuitous violence filled the air.
I'm sorry,
Ryu said quietly as he and Nina waited for her to finish with the unlucky would-be muggers.
Don't be,
Nina replied.
It's a bad situation, and one that none of us can help. I've known for a long time that this was the way the world worked. It's bullshit, is what it is,
Cat snapped, coming back out of the alley with blood on her fists.
You've got the prettiest damn wings I've ever seen, and I don't see any reason you should have to hide them. Anybody tries to tell me otherwise in this city, I'm not responsible for my actions. Just want to get that down here and now. I really should be raising some sort of objection to this.
Ryu shook his head.
Somehow, though, I can't quite find the motivation to do so.
He looked around.
Come on, let's go get something to drink. Isn't it a bit early for that?
Nina asked, clearly seizing the opportunity to talk about something less personal.
I didn't mean alcohol.
Ryu shook his head.
We've got work to do first.
Cat grumbled.
Plenty of time to recover from a couple weeks of forced sobriety on the road after the bars open,
Ryu assured her.
Right now, let's just get some juice or something while we think about our next move.
A street-side cafe provided both fresh grape juice and a place to sit and drink it. Getting a table outside, the three of them watched the street traffic as they sipped at their cups, all of them clearly still thinking about the events at the castle and just as clearly agreeing that they had no intention of talking about it.
Hey, folks! Come and see the traveling magic show, over here.
A Highlander clansman was calling out to passers-by in a park across the street from them. Simian in form, the Highlander clan were short and lanky, with thick brown fur and ape-like faces. This one was a young adult by the looks of him, with cunning orange eyes. He wore somewhat threadbare blue shorts and an open vest, a bandana around his neck. Dancing around as he juggled balls, he continued to try and attract attention.
Come one, come all, a new sensation guarantees no obligation. What the hell does that mean?
Cat asked Riley.
It means gratuities are appreciated, but not required, young lady.
The showman shouted at her across the street.
Come see for yourself. Well?
Cat asked the other two.
We could all use a little something to distract us, I suppose.
Ryu shrugged, finishing up his juice.
Nina. We might as well,
she agreed, watching the showman do a handstand, continuing to juggle with his feet.
He seems to have some talent.
Standing up, they crossed the street to join the few other bystanders watching. The Highlander was a skilled entertainer, that much was obvious. Combining legerdemain with acrobatics and keeping up a running line of humorous commentary the entire time, he soon had a few zenny thrown into the cap at his feet. Encouraged by this response, he stepped up his game, pulling several bizarre props out of a sack and using them in inventive tricks that garnered him even more handouts.
And now, for my next trick, I'll require a volunteer from the audience.
He called out as he pulled some flat boards up from where he had been standing, quickly assembling them into a 7-foot square blue box with bright yellow question marks on the sides.
Using my fantastical magical abilities, I shall make some brave soul vanish into thin air, right before your eyes. You, sir. You there. You look like a brave young man. Hey.
Ryu blinked as the showman approached him.
Wait, what? Don't tell me you're afraid.
The Highlander asked loudly.
Why, whatever would the young ladies accompanying you think? Yeah, what would we think?
Cat teased.
You stay out of this,
Ryu growled, ignoring Nina's giggling.
All right, Mr. Performer, I'll bite. What do I have to do? Just come right this way.
The showman led him over to the box, opened one side of it, and bowed deferentially.
Step inside, and take a ride.
As Ryu did as he had instructed, he closed it behind him and continued to talk, his voice echoing inside the wooden box.
Now then, let the magic commence. Agrabah. Akbar. Aranyo. Shazam.
He struck the box's side, and beneath Ryu's feet, the bottom collapsed, dumping him down into the darkness below.
Hey, what the?
Ryu started to protest, then cut off with a pained grunt as he hit solid dirt several feet below. Up above, somewhat distantly, he could hear the sounds of the show concluding with a great deal of applause. Looking around in the darkness, he quickly realized what had happened. The box had concealed a hole dug deep in the earth, which the collapsing floor had dumped him into. It was a good 6 feet deep. Reaching up, he felt the bottom of the box above his head, as solid seeming as it had before. An obvious solution presented itself, but before he could apply it, he noticed something else. Most of the voices were moving away, but 2 of them were growing louder. He couldn't quite make out what Kat and Nina were saying to the showman, but whatever it was, they sounded angry. After thinking about that for a moment, he smirked and relaxed, leaning against the side of the pit and listening to the argument above him. After several minutes, he judged that the conversation was probably reaching its climax by the tones of their voices, and acted accordingly. Drawing his sword, he stabbed it up through the wooden floor and wiggled it around. After only a moment, he was rewarded with surprised yells from the girls, and pulled the sword back down, sheathing it again and waiting. It wasn't long before the box was pulled out of the way, exposing the hole to sunlight again.
There you are!
Kat yelled, leaning down over him.
I should have known it was something like that.
Reaching down, she grabbed his hand and easily pulled him out of the pit.
This clown was going on about another dimension or something, and then he tried to get us to go on dates with him.
She whirled on the cringing showman, who was slowly backing away, unaware of Nina floating behind his back.
And where do you think you're going?
She asked coolly.
The
Highlander stammered, hands raised.
That is to say, I can totally explain this. Sure you can, buddy.
Kat advanced, cracking her knuckles.
Go ahead. Start explaining everything to me. Are you all right?
Nina asked, floating around the ensuing discussion towards Ryu.
You're not hurt, are you? No, it was just a nasty little fall.
He shook his head.
I've taken worse. Looks like he was just trying to pull a stunt, not actually hurt anybody. Some stunt,
Nina said wryly as the sounds from behind her grew more and more violent.
We should probably stop her before the guard arrive. This isn't Corsair, you know. Somehow, I gathered that,
Ryu agreed, actually looking around the city more carefully for the first time now that his anger had cooled. Winlan was by far the nicest looking city he had ever visited. One of the oldest in the world, it had been built on top of a series of ridges leading up to its mountaintop, seaside location on the edge of the Windian Chasm. The castle occupied the peak, and each successive level below it held other buildings, the more expensive looking the closer they were to the top. Even the lower ones were tall and well built, though, there didn't seem to be an actual slum anywhere to be seen. The buildings were all standing independently of each other, and windmills decorated the upper portions were common.
Must be an interesting place to live,
Ryu said quietly, looking around.
Where do they stuff people like me and Kat? It's not that bad.
Nina shook her head.
Drifters just aren't approved of, that's all. There's inns and taverns down on the lower levels. I think they count on people who don't like this kind of place to get uncomfortable and move on all by themselves. That usually happens. I'll bet,
Ryu agreed.
So what about asking questions? Are we going to get asked to stop bothering the nice people if we go around talking about a thief girl we're looking for? Those guards up there weren't exactly subtle. My parents never would have allowed that when I lived here,
Nina said quietly.
But it's been 10 years since then. I don't know how much has changed. Great.
Ryu sighed, then glanced past her.
Oh, here we go. Looks like she's done.
Kat was bringing the showman over to them, marching him before her at arm's length. Surprisingly, he actually didn't look too busted up, only a few bruises and lumps visible.
I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry, ma'am.
he said, bowing formally.
It won't happen again. Good boy.
Cat let him go.
All right, take off. Wait, hold on.
The Highlander glanced up again, eyes keen.
I heard you guys talking. You're looking for somebody, right? A female thief. Listen, you.
Cat started to growl.
Just a second, Cat,
Ryu told her, looking the Highlander over.
He's right. We're looking for one who robbed a nobleman back in hometown. Our lead says she was heading in this direction. I doubt she'd pass a place like this up, even if it was out of her way. Why do you ask? I'm pretty good at hunting down information,
the showman explained, rubbing his hands together.
And I've been in town long enough to know where to do it. Why don't you guys let me make this whole mess up to you by seeing what I can find? An interesting offer,
Nina murmured skeptically.
And what would you ask in return for this service? Nothing much, I assure you,
the Highlander promised.
It's just that I'm starting to wear out my welcome around here, and I never really cared much for traveling on the road alone. A little dangerous without anybody to share the watch, you know? So I figured that if you folks are going to be heading out yourselves fairly soon. You want to tag along, hey?
Cat glanced at Ryu.
I don't know. What do you think about this, Ryu? Well, maybe.
Ryu casually examined the dragon's tear, trying to look like he was just toying with it while thinking the showman's offer over. To his surprise, rather than the deceptive orange he was expecting, it showed yellow. Looking over it, he weighed up his thoughts on the Highlander a second time.
I guess it can't hurt to hear you out. Let's see what you can bring us, and then we'll talk. Deal. Deal, boss.
The showman seized his hand, arm extending a surprising length, and shook it warmly.
You're not making a mistake, trust me.
Releasing it, he glanced down the ridges.
There's a nice little tavern near the southeast gate called the Emperor. Why don't I meet you there in 2 hours, and we can talk? All right, we'll do that,
Ryu agreed.
See you there, mister. Sten.
The Highlander grinned.
Sten Legacy. See you in a few.
Pedestrians were passing by around them again now that the violence had stopped. Stepping back, Sten vanished into the crowd so easily it was almost like invisibility.
Well.
Ryu glanced at Kat and Nina.
What do you think? I'm not so sure about this,
Nina said skeptically.
He seems a little shady. We're a little shady,
Kat pointed out.
I don't know, I'm kind of on the fence on this one. Wait and see, you know. This, after you blackened his eye for him just 5 minutes ago.
Nina commented, but her tone was jovial.
I do that to a lot of guys.
Kat shrugged.
We told you all about how I met Ryu here, didn't we? When you get right down to it, it's not our call,
Nina pointed out.
He's the fearless leader, isn't he? We're just backup. I guess he kind of is, when you put it that way.
Kat rubbed her chin, then turned back to Ryu.
Well, fearless leader. Oh, brother.
Ryu rolled his eyes.
Look, there's more to this guy than meets the eye, okay? He was acting different than when he was selling us bullshit. I figure we might as well hear him out. Besides.
He remembered the way the man's arm had shot out 3 feet in an instant to shake his hand more firmly than he had expected.
He was talking about not wanting to be on the road alone, but I have a feeling he might be better in a fight than you would think. He does have a point there,
Kat agreed.
I could tell while I was whacking him around that he wasn't fighting back on purpose. If I'd actually tried to hurt him badly, I don't think it'd have been anywhere near as easy. Just as long as it's not because he likes that kind of thing,
Nina murmured.
I sincerely hope that's not the case. Oh, ew.
Kat made a face.
No, if that's what it is, he's gonna wind up in a trash can before we leave town.
She gave Ryu a glare, irritated by his amused look.
What? That's interesting to hear coming from you, after the things you were saying back before our fight in Corsair,
he replied calmly.
Damn it, I didn't mean any of that like that.
She sputtered.
What kind of girl do you take me for, hey? I'm beginning to regret introducing this topic of conversation,
Nina said to nobody in particular.
Can we please talk about something else? We might as well look for a good inn,
Ryu suggested.
We'll be staying at least one night, no matter what Sten finds for us.
He examined his wallet, raising an eyebrow.
Maybe hit some shops as well. Say what you will about these last few weeks, the zenny's really been coming in. We might be able to actually buy some good gear now. Why don't we look around a bit, first?
Nina suggested.
We don't really have to rush that much.
She was looking around the town now, her eyes melancholy.
She's got a point,
Kat agreed quickly.
It's a nice little place. Not really the kind I'd usually rush to visit, but hey, a little novelty now and then is cool. Why don't we just take it easy tonight? I'd say we've earned it. Alright, I know when I'm outvoted.
Ryu chuckled.
I'm fine with drifting around for a few hours before we head to that tavern. Let's do some sightseeing.
Despite their lack of formal education, Ryu and Kat weren't idiots. They didn't need Nina to tell them that their tour would be best kept to the lower levels of the city, and definitely away from the palace. Because of that, they didn't encounter any more trouble for the next few hours, locating a comfortable-looking inn fairly quickly and then spending some time simply enjoying the sights before drifting over to the local armory. After examining the local prices and talking them over, they picked up a chainmail vest for Ryu and some enchanted robes for Nina and Kat both. The sun was just starting to set when they made their way to the Ampura, where Sten had told them to meet him. Somewhat to all of their surprise, it wasn't one of the more shabby examples of the trade. The owner had taken the roof off and replaced it with a latticework of beams interwoven with leaves and vines. The look was novel, and very Windian. Even Ryu and Kat had to agree that it wasn't a bad touch.
I'd hate to be in here when it rained, but it's kind of cool right now,
Ryu admitted, staring up at the sky as it caught fire while he nursed his mug of ale.
There are anti-weather spells over the top of the building,
Nina murmured, sipping the wine she had decided on, slightly surprising both of the other two. They hadn't really expected her to be a drinker at all.
Strong ones. Either somebody paid a lot for them, or one of the staff is in semi-retirement after an entirely different career when they were younger. It's more common than you would think. An ex-mage bartender, hey.
Kat shrugged, looking over her new armor. Somewhat skeptically, they'd had to do some fast talking to get her to agree to the purchase, and she still wasn't completely convinced.
Hey, I've heard weirder. The protective magic that's been woven into it will still work if you cut them down,
Nina assured her, guessing the reason for her discontent.
It won't provide quite as much defense as Ryu's chainmail, but it should still be a step up from that leotard. I'll need to do that so it doesn't get in my way when I'm fighting.
Kat nodded.
That's why I don't wear the heavy stuff like him. It'd weigh me down too much, and defensive isn't the way I fight anyways.
Taking a gulp from her own mug, she glanced around.
So, how long are we going to wait here for this guy? I'm all for a few drinks, especially after today, but we shouldn't stick around all night. Well, here's the good news,
a familiar voice said from the far side of their table.
That won't be necessary.
Smiling, Sten rose from under the table and took the fourth seat, signaling the barmaid without even looking.
How the hell did you do that?
Kat demanded, looking under the table and then back at him several times.
Told you I was a magician, didn't I?
Sten winked.
Sorry again about that mess earlier, by the way. When I see a cute girl, I just can't help myself. It's in the past,
Nina told him firmly.
What she said,
Ryu agreed.
Did you find what we need to know? The usual, Sten.
The barmaid asked as she passed by.
You got it, Rosa,
Sten called back, then turned to Ryu again.
Listen for yourself, boss. There's been burglaries in town, all right. 2 houses of the lesser nobility, 3 wealthy merchants, and 1 retired professor all got hit over the course of the previous week. The last house was exactly a week ago in 3 hours and 15 minutes, so the thief has probably fled the city by now.
His grin grew even wider.
A female thief, aged 13 to 16 by the looks of her, with hair the same color as yours, boss. That's her.
Ryu yelled, slamming his mug on the table, then winced as several nearby people turned their heads to look curiously at them.
Sorry.
Despite his embarrassment, though, he wasn't quite able to hold back his own grin quite so easily.
And you're sure this girl is the one who robbed all these places? Maybe not all of them, but the last house had an eyewitness account from the man himself,
Sten explained.
He described her very accurately. I told her I was looking into bringing her to justice, and he was all too eager to be helpful. Probably more out of wanting revenge than out of altruism, but hey, information's still good. Indeed it is,
Nina agreed, eyes thoughtful.
Tell me, Mr. Legacy, how did you know the one we were looking for was a blue-haired adolescent? I didn't,
he admitted.
But the description that last guy gave me is fairly distinctive, so I figured I'd just drop it and see if you guys reacted. Looks like I was right. And that's not all I have. The morning after that last theft, the gate guards reported a strange young girl leaving the city and heading further west, towards Capitan. That is where the main road leads from here,
Kat replied thoughtfully.
It's the most likely place she'd head next, if she was on a major looting spree. Sounds like it,
Ryu agreed, then handed the barmaid some zenny as she brought Sten his mug.
On me, miss. Our friend here's earned it. Why thank you, boss.
Sten took the mug and drank deeply from it.
I take it from that we have ourselves a deal. All right, you've convinced me.
Ryu shrugged.
We won't be heading to Capitan right away, though. We've got a trip to make back to hometown, first. That might not be the best idea in the world, Chief,
Sten advised him, voice turning serious.
This girl has a 1-week lead on you. I'm guessing you've been looking for her for a while now, right? Let that lead get any longer, and she'll probably lose you again, whether she knows you're after her or not. Now that you've finally got something, you'll want to narrow that lead as quickly as you can. It's the only way you'll ever catch her. We know,
Kat snapped.
But... Actually, I'm in agreement with Mr. Legacy,
Nina said suddenly.
This is too valuable to pass up. We need to pursue her, as soon as possible. Catching the thief and clearing your friend's name take clear precedence over bringing me home. You don't expect us to just leave you here, do you?
Kat protested.
She's right,
Ryu agreed.
It's completely out of the question. Actually, I was going to ask if you minded if I came along as well,
Nina explained. A few moments of silence followed that statement.
Wait,
Sten piped up.
Let me see if I get this clear, boss. You've got not one, but 2 cute girls helping you track down another girl, and you were going to send one of them back home. Shut up,
Kat said absently without any real heat.
Are you sure, Nina? I mean hell, we're cool with that, but the magic school. I think Yoji will understand, and what he says, goes,
Nina replied.
He's well aware that my stay there was always an unusual one. Of course, he might not agree to pay you for recovering me from the Jokers, but I'll try and talk to him about that. Don't worry about it,
Ryu said firmly.
If this is what you want to do, that's more important any day. Like Kat said, we'd be more than glad to have you along for the ride. Both as magical backup, and as a friend. Well then.
She raised her glass, smiling even with her eyes.
To catching a thief, ladies and gentlemen.
The other 3 all raised their mugs.
So, what's the story behind all this?
Sten asked after they had finished their drinks and called for refills.
Sounds like you've been after this girl for a while now. I'm kind of curious about the whole thing, now. You said a buddy of yours had been framed. Essentially,
Ryu admitted, leaning back.
Alright, might as well. The night's young. Let's see, where to start.
It was a good night, one that went far better than the day had. Sten had an easygoing, talkative manner that was hard not to like, though Kat and Nina remained slightly suspicious of him at first. They relaxed more as they began adding details about their parts in the story, and as they went through more and more rounds of drinks. They left the demonic parts out of it, but told the rest honestly, and Sten was duly impressed. By the time they left the tavern a few hours after sundown, it was like he had been with them all along. As it turned out, Sten was even staying at the same inn they died, and they all headed back together, Ryu having to help a somewhat dizzy Kat walk straight. Nina fared slightly better, due to floating rather than walking, but still had one close call with a torch. Laughing at their own drunkenness, the 4 of them bade each other good night and went to their rooms, Ryu falling asleep almost immediately. The next morning, they set out on the Great Western Road after breakfast, leaving the city through the southernmost gate. Ryu, Kat, and Nina all nursed slight hangovers, but Sten was as cheerful as ever, though he quickly sensed their mood and kept his witticisms under control. Before too much time passed, they started to recover, and by noon they were more or less back to their normal selves. The attack came swiftly and without warning. They were passing by a clump of trees when Sten yelled a warning, dropping to the ground. The other 3 followed suit, as wooden arrows flew through the air above their heads. Without a word, Nina sprayed the trees with lightning, and the culprits emerged, hissing angrily, 2 green, reptilian humanoids in white breastplates, with long snouts and lashing tails. Each held a longbow in their hands and a quiver of arrows on their backs. Even as they scrambled from the lightning, they reached for another arrow each.
Oh, no you don't, assholes!
Kat roared, racing towards them much faster than Ryu could keep up with. She didn't run alone, though. Sten was with her, long limbs eating up the ground despite his small stature. They were on the enemy even as they drew back their bowstrings, attacking before they could release. Kat's staff crushed the head of the one on the left, while Sten struck out with his hands at the rightmost one. Only when he pulled them back, leaving deep, bloody wounds in the archer's chest, did they see the long daggers he held. Both enemies collapsed, clearly dead, as Ryu and Nina caught up.
Nice work,
Kat said casually.
Fairly routine.
Sten shrugged.
Wish I had some better blades, but you know how that goes, right? We all do,
Ryu agreed.
You've got good eyes. That might not have gone so well if you hadn't seen those guys. Kimoto clansmen.
Nina shook her head in disgust.
Savages, the lot of them. The lesser tribe infests Windia and Nanai, this probably won't be the last time some of them try picking us off before we arrive. We'll just have to watch out for them, then.
Ryu looked over the bodies a moment more, then pulled the silver dagger he had taken from the jokers out of his belt and handed it to Sten.
Here, try this. Looks like it'd be better than the ones you've got. Not exactly military standard, but not bad at all,
Sten replied, flipping it casually to test its weight.
You sure, boss? It's not like I'm getting much use out of it,
Ryu pointed out.
I prefer longer blades. If we're all going to be watching each other's backs from here on out, I'll feel better if you've got at least one you can rely on. I appreciate it.
Sten nodded, oddly serious and businesslike as he returned his daggers to concealed places in his clothes. A moment later, though, he was smirking again, looking more like his normal self.
Come on, let's see if they've got any zenny on them. I might even forgive them for trying to kill us if they do. I'm pretty sure there's a logical fallacy in there somewhere, but I'm not sure where,
Ryu said dryly, watching him and Kat loot the bodies. In only a few minutes of violence, something had changed between them and Sten. It wasn't much, but something was there now that hadn't been before. When they were done, he inclined his head west.
Let's keep going, shall we? Whatever you say, boss,
the Highlander replied easily as the four of them went back to the road and returned their journey west, under the noon sun. And I thought that I had found myself today.